begin. Okay, we are interviewing Dr. Clifford Dochterman, who was Rotary International President in 1992 and 1993 as part of our project of the 50th anniversary of Pleasanton Rotary. Welcome to Museum on Main, Dr. Dochterman.
Thank you. It's nice to be here in Pleasanton.
Thank you. And let's see, so tell us a little bit about your personal history.
Well, my name, I go by the name of Cliff Dochterman. I grew up and was born and grew up in Ohio and came out here along with a million other people during World War II and did my graduate work at the University of California in the Boat Law School. And then decided not to practice law, but rather to go into education. And so I spent I was hired by the University of California, and I spent a little over 20 years in administration at Berkeley in the statewide system, and then I spent another 20 years at the University of Pacific as the executive vice president of the university up there. So those were pretty much the highlights of my life while at Berkeley, I became involved in Rotary.
And when was that?
That was in 1958. I joined the Berkeley Rotary Club, and I joined the Rotary Club mainly because of the prestige of the organization. Virtually every business and person in Berkeley belonged to the Rotary Club. It was a club of maybe 230 members at that time. A lot of members. The president of the university was in the Rotary, and most of the deans and a lot of other administrators, the football coaches, dean of admissions, and the deans of students. Virtually all at Berkeley belonged to the Rotary Club, and I was pleased to be part of that group.
Now, that was a time when they were enforcing the classifications a little more strictly than now, I understand.
Well, that's true, and I had some difficulty getting into Rotary. A friend of mine, one day we were doing some things. I had written a script for a documentary, and this was a film producer, did documentaries and training films and business films. And he was shooting this documentary at the University of California. And he said, I have to leave because I have to go to Rotary. Why don't you come and go to Rotary with me? And at that time in my life, a free lunch any place was worthwhile. So I went to Rotary, and about 6 months later he called and he says, you knew so many people in the Rotary Club and you seem to enjoy it. I proposed your name for membership, but I'm sorry to say they've turned you down. They didn't think your position was high enough in the university to merit belonging to the Berkeley Rotary Club. Well, a year went by, and he called me again. He says, you've been moving up and you're moving into the president's office and as an administrator, and I proposed your name again. But darn it, they turned you down again because of the too many people in the education classification. I said, well, I'm used to being rejected by a Rotary. So a year later, he calls again. He says, Rotary has a new thing that lets 2 people in each classification. So we found someone to propose you as an additional active member. And so 3 strikes and you're in. And so that's how I joined the Berkeley Rotary Club. As a matter of fact, as I said, it was about 230 members, but 5 years later I was president of the club, and I joined it because of the prestige of the business and business and professional people of Berkeley, and just to be associated with that kind of group I thought was a real treat.
Now, when you became president, was there often a longer gap between joining and then being elected president?
Well,
I noticed that with some of our younger members in the Pleasanton Club, the gap is usually only a few years. Like 5 years is not.
Well, I became the president of the Berkeley Rotary Club about Well, I've joined in 58. In 63, 64, I was president of that club. And then 4 years later, in 1968, I became the Rotary District Governor. I have to say, when I joined Rotary, I thought I was going to lunch. And I didn't think particularly that I would be going week after week to Rotary and do anything besides do some of the projects in the club. But I was selected to be the Rotary District Governor here in Northern California, went from Newark and all the way to the Oregon border at that time, the district, and it was a new commitment for me, being district governor. One thing and another, I accepted a few assignments, and I was asked to be on some international committees, and then the activity goes on, and finally, I was active in many of the major planning and direction of Rotary for probably the last 30 years. And eventually in 1992, 93, I became the world president of Rotary.
What is the biggest difference in your experience between being a president of a local Rotary club and being the president of the international? Now,
well, besides just the sheer magnitude of your responsibilities, the local Rotary Club, of course, you're involved in local community activities and generally 1 or 2 or 3 international activities, exchange students. Rotary International, by the time you first you have to become a director on the board of directors, and then the apex gets pretty tight up there from 34,000 club presidents to 1 world president. But as a world president of Rotary, your thinking is much broader than the activities of your local community. You're beginning to think in terms of the world as your base. I often said one of the most difficult tasks, I think, for the world president of Rotary is to maintain a unified organization, to try to keep a world organization together. There's so many centrifugal forces of nationalism and political differences and religious differences and languages and cultures pulling the organization into nationalism or regionalism, and to keep a world organization of 200 countries, some 1,200,000 members, 34,000 communities, groups together is a huge task, and this is part of the responsibility of the president and the board of directors.
I imagine it requires a lot of diplomatic skill.
Well, you do travel pretty much as a diplomat. I often said I was, during that year as president, I was home in my own bed only 5 nights the whole year. Other time I was either in our world headquarters in Evanston, Illinois, or traveling. And I probably at least, I would say, maybe 250 days out of the year I was on the road traveling to all parts of the world. I probably visited nearly 100 countries in that particular year. And so every day you go, there's some new people that have been sleeping in their own bed, and you've been trying to get a night's sleep on an airplane or someplace or in a hotel that you're not used to.
And actually, one of your biographies on the site, I believe it was on the one on the Rotary International, website said that you had probably spoken to more different Rotary clubs than anybody is still alive.
I guess that may be true. I have been very, frankly, I enjoy speaking. Speaking is one of the things that have enjoyed doing, and developing the stories and sharing the stories with Rotary clubs around the world. As we all know, Rotary is looking for programs, and I always seem to be a free speaker. I believe in free speech, and so that's why I make it free. But it is a demanding position. Some of my friends have paid a very high price for that position. 3 past presidents in the last 15 years, their wife has died within a few months of finishing the job, because they want to keep up, and they press themselves, and sometimes do not take care of their health as they should, just because it is such a demanding position.
Very unfortunate. So by the time you became president, you had been involved with Rotary for over 30 years.
That's right.
How had the organization changed during that time? What did you see as the main...
Well, certainly major changes have taken place. I would say, obviously, one of the natural changes was the bringing of women into the organization. And when Rotary was started in 1905, there were very few women in business management, professional positions. And so it was a natural thing that it was a men's organization. But more and more, as women have moved into all the professions, virtually all the business positions of the world, in most cultures, but not all, it was time that women became a member, because Rotary is an organization of business and professional people, and that are trying to build better communities and a better world. So bringing women was one of the major changes I had seen. Second one would be the nature of the membership. In the earlier days of Rotary, the members of Rotary were the business people up and down Main Street, and they would be the owners of the stores, the private small business people, or the corporate people. Today, with the changing in corporate style, the ownership of the businesses up and down most communities could be in the other side of the world. And you don't have the same type of membership in that capacity. Another major change is the nature of Rotary as a world organization. In the earlier days, most Rotary clubs did things just in their own community, providing shoes for kids, or providing medical supplies, or recreation equipment, to providing food baskets for those in need, and so many other the local projects, building recreation centers, helping schools, building playgrounds, and ballparks, and all kinds of things. Now we see Rotary, many of these things that Rotary used to do has been taken over by government agencies, by more and more government involvement in meeting welfare needs and the needs of individuals. So Rotary has, much of our activity has expanded beyond the local community into the world, and Rotary works in all parts of the world today, where there's in third world countries where the need for food and the need for education, health care, sanitation, all of these are big issues of the world, which Rotary. So we're more involved in larger corporate projects, I would say, in addition to the things that Rotary does in the community.
And does the international organization play a big role in coordinating those projects?
Yes. Well, we do have a project which has virtually changed the nature of Rotary. And in 1979, Rotary was mostly local activities, and the leadership seemed to think that the time was coming. We ought to be involved in some corporate programs that Rotary as a world organization could take on. So there was 3 of us that were asked to design a new direction for Rotary called Health, Hunger, and Humanity, working on much larger projects than any club or any district could do. And out of that grew the program of polio immunization. Our first project was in the Philippines, and we immunized 6 million children in the Philippines in our first project. And then we decided, I was chairing the committee, and we decided if we can do it in the Philippines, maybe we ought to do it in the whole world. Polio in the 70s and the early 80s was pretty well eradicated in North America and in Europe, but the rest of the world, there was at that time perhaps 350 to 400,000 cases of polio in the world. So I suggested that maybe we ought to immunize all the children in the world, and I was too naive and maybe just uninformed. I think this would be something we could do pretty easily. And we adopted that program. We had Dr. Sabin came and talked with us and said, you're going to have to immunize raise $100 million just to buy the first vaccine, and you're going to have to immunize 500 million children. I thought, ooh, that's the dumbest idea we ever had. But we had already made a commitment. And we started then in 1985, just 30 years ago, to immunize the children of the world. And we raised, Dr. Sabin said you need 100 million. So we set a goal of 110 million, just in case we fell short or perhaps cost of raising the money. And in a 2-year time, we had raised $240 million. And we went to the World Health Organization, and we said, we want to help eradicate polio. And they says, get out of here, you're just a bunch of men that go to lunch. We're all the health experts in the world. And we said, what? We have 1 million members who will give their time voluntarily around the world to immunize people. And we have $240 million in our pocket. They said, come on in, and we became a partner with the World Health Organization. As I said, there was 350 to 400,000 children getting polio every year. Mm-hmm. And in this 30 years, we have immunized over 99% of all the children in the world. And this year, we expect there will be less than 300 cases in the entire world. And it could well be that in another year or two, polio will be the second disease that's ever been eradicated in the world, along with smallpox. It's been a tough siege, but it's been well worth it, because there's millions of children that are walking and running and playing like kids ought to do, that were relieved of the dreaded disease of polio in the world. So that is the nature of the major change of Rotary. We now think of other projects. We have many other projects of sanitation and in the communities, and educational programs and health care programs all over the world that Rotary is working on.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier that when you talk to the clubs, when you go visit them and talk to them, that you have stories to share.
Well, I do. I've been very, very fortunate of Rotary giving a guy from California the opportunity to become the world president and to travel and to see dozens and dozens of projects and the programs of Rotary. As you go around the world, everybody wants to show them that their project. And I've got so many of these stories of that are human interest. Stories such as going in, I think it was Sri Lanka. One day we had to put surgical gowns on and masks and going into a burn unit with little kids. Maybe 70% of their body, because so many of the people just cooked in wood fires in front of their little house or shack or whatever, and going in this burn unit, all established by Rotarians there. I remember in Nigeria one day, they said, we want to show you a project. We went to a blind school, and there was about 125 little boys standing in front of the school. They're all maybe 7, 8 to 10, 12, and they're all waiting for some visitor. And I walked down the line and I touched each one on the shoulder and said a word to them. And then a little boy steps out in front and he had a piece of paper. It was Braille paper, and he made his little speech as he ran his fingers over the Braille writing, and thanking Rotary for giving them the first Braille printing press in all of Western Africa. And, you know, the thing that touched me the most is that I had approved that project perhaps a year or two earlier as chairman of the 3H committee. So I see so many of these little projects, and I remember, I believe I was in Costa Rica, and we were in a orphanage, and it was run by a sister of the Catholic Church, and we had helped the orphanage, and when I left, this woman gave me a handkerchief, which she had embroidered my name around the edge of the handkerchief. And I often thought of the thoughtfulness and the kindness of, she had what she could give to the leader of Rotary, not just me as a person, but to somebody who had given them so much help for these orphan children. There's so many stories that you can tell that you have been rewarded by this experience of Rotary.
Wow. Okay, it almost seems impertinent to ask this question after all of that. One thing we've been asking all the local former presidents is that at the end of the day, after you've seen all this, why does Rotary matter? What does Rotary bring to the world that other things aren't?
Well, I would say Rotary probably gives an opportunity, doesn't guarantee anything, your membership, but it gives each member an opportunity to do something that's worthwhile. It gives ordinary people, I'm just an ordinary guy, grew up in a very modest home in the Depression years, some extraordinary opportunities to touch people around the world. And without Rotary, so many things I would never have done, I'd never seen. I would never been able to go around the world and provide immunization to children in remote areas of Africa or India, places where without Rotarians, they had no hope that they would have a better life. And to go and know that just ordinary people can do something that's worthwhile, because we all generally have a desire to make life just a little better for our family, maybe our community, our neighbors, and the world. as each president of Rotary International selects a theme. And I picked the theme after a lot of thought that real happiness is helping other people. And that touched so many things, that so much more comes back into our own lives when we reach out and help other people have a better life. And so that's really what I think Rotary is all about. Two things to sum up what Rotary is. It's friendship. Some of the greatest and deepest friendships I've ever had came from fellow Rotarians, not only my own club, but clubs around the world. And next is the opportunity, because of this friendship, you work together in service projects to help other people. If you got a job to do, you generally don't call on a stranger, you call on a friend. I got to move my car today, what are you going to do to help me? I need some help. You call a friend, and we say, we've got a problem in this community, we have to do something about it. Let's all work together. And so this friendship leads to service to build a better community, and that's, in me, the real summation in 2 words of what Rotary is friendship of business and professional people to serve and build a better community.
I can't think of a better note to end on.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much, Doctor.